So I'm Sharon Terry, the president and CEO of PXE International. And I'll talk a little bit about how I came to do this, but first we will do a couple Zoom things. You all have renamed yourselves beautifully so that people know where people are from. We will also have a time toward the end of this meeting where we're going to put you in a breakout room by geography so that you can chat with each other. And we know that, some of you are, actually nobody except Dara are from the only person from that country, and obviously we'll put you with other people. So Dara, we would put you with the UKers. I know that's not always ideal, but in this case, I think it's probably fine. They're your close neighbors and share a language. One of the other things I want to make sure you all are comfortable with doing is using the chat. So at the bottom of your screen, if you're on a laptop or a computer, you'll see a thing called a chat. That's like one of those little cartoon bubbles. And we could practice with the chat. And if you'd put into the chat how you're feeling right now, whatever, rushed, harried, great, whatever, or great, Joanne, just simply hi, so that we can see that everybody has the capacity to use the chat. Yes, thank goodness it's Friday. I'm in San Diego, so it's not quite the evening, and we have another session tonight to launch North America and South America. So I won't be quite having my glass of wine yet, but I will be glad if you guys are all relaxing.
We're having ours. It's evening.
Yes, yeah. Great. Yeah, so if you can't use the chat, and also if you can only type in your native language, feel free to do that. That's fine. The other people from your country and some of us who make a stab at it will be able to tell what you said. Great. Oh, it's bonfire night. I was in the UK one year for bonfire night. That was exciting. Okay, and don't worry about needing to go off or on the Zoom. Like to feed hungry children is a good idea. Is there anybody having trouble using the chat? Oh, okay. So are you on let's see, how about unmuting? Can you unmute? There we go.
Okay, I did send a message, but it only went, it seems, to Joanne and Jason Colwell in UK.
Okay, yeah, so if you look at the bottom where you do type, you can see that you could chat directly with someone like you just did, which is good practice. And then at the very top of that list, it says everyone in the meeting. Can you see that, or is that? I also know it.
I don't see, I see other people like Chris Bradley to everyone, but I just saw a direct message to me, to Joanne and Jay. I'm sorry, Joanne and Jason, I'm not meaning to single you out for my messages. And also it just says HH. I had typed in "great to see you all," and it just says HH, which stands for Hope Hanlon, but but my full name
isn't showing. Yeah. Okay. Okay. And if you see all those names, does it let you scroll up to the very top? Might be Mary Pekakonis is the top person, and right above her is the word everyone.
The people I've got at the top are Joanne and Jason Colwell, UK.
And that's it in the whole list. Go ahead.
And then Mary.
Okay, and above Joanne's name. Yeah.
Sorry, everyone is able to send to everybody. It's saying, so to everyone, to everyone.
Right. But so above Joanne's name, what does it say?
It just says chat.
Oh, interesting.
I have a very different screen. I've noticed that in Zoom meetings before. Because
Yeah.
my, it's but please don't let me delay because of
Okay.
my issues. I don't want to delay everybody just because of that.
Okay. If
I
you
think it
Hope,
sounds like you may need to go to the bottom, Hope, because that's what you're describing is the chats that have already been sent. So further down, there should be a to box, and in that it should say everyone.
Sadly, on my iPad, which is what I'm using,
oh,
I don't have a thing at the bottom. I've got mute,
right,
stop video. It's all at the top right-hand
right.
corner.
Yes,
So
yes.
to get to chat, I tapped on more, and then it said chat, meeting settings, minimize meeting, disconnect audio, raise hands, and so on. But I don't really have a facility, it seems, to sort of communicate with everybody. So I just don't want to delay this meeting anymore.
No worries, Hope. So let's do this. We will look up the iPad instructions, which I should have done a long time ago because they are different. And meanwhile, you can send any message you want to go to everyone to Mary, and Mary will send it to everyone.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. Any other technical issues people want to have a help with? Welcome, Jonathan. Seeing you now. Okay. All right. So I thought we would get started with this introductory meeting with a pretty simple agenda, and that is I will give you a little description of PXE International. Many of you are old timers. I'm sitting here with my mug from Cape Town, South Africa, thanks to Anna Suzanne. We went to Cape Town in 1998, a couple years after my kids were diagnosed. So my children, Elizabeth Terry and Ian Terry, you will see Ian Terry tomorrow. He will do the kickoff talk. The generations are moving right along to have him be able and very able to do the kickoff is fabulous. So my kids were diagnosed in 1994. I have a TED Talk with over 1 million views. And while I personally could be quite proud of that, I'm much more interested in the fact that 1 million people have heard PXE pseudoxanthoma elastica, more than 1 million. It's like 1.4 million now. And that's been fabulous PR for us in the sense that we've gotten a lot of people joining us. We're at almost 5,000 people on our registration rolls, which is pretty impressive for a small, rare condition like pseudoxanthoma elasticum. And that is, I think a really, really wonderful thing. So we established the foundation. The kids were diagnosed Christmas 1994. We established the foundation early in 95. Anna Suzanne was our first employee very shortly after because we wanted to serve South Africa as well as we could, it being that there's a large number of people proportionately in South Africa. We then grew the staff to a reasonable size for a small organization. Mary Pekakanis came on early on. And Mary, you want to say hello and maybe say a bit about how long you've been with us?
Yes, I found Sharon in 2004. And I think I was employed by the beginning of 2005.
Yep.
Yes.
And you may have seen Mary's name in various emails and so forth. Mary does a lot of support stuff for you guys, like taking care of PXEers. And Mary's in Washington, D.C. However, she's in office space that PXE has always borrowed from Genetic Alliance, which is an umbrella group for disease groups. And Genetic Alliance is closing that office. It will close at the end of January. And so PXE won't have a physical office anymore. It doesn't matter anymore. Years ago, that would have been horrible and we would have been just distraught. But as you can see here, we can work easily virtually. And so we've been doing that. In the course of this COVID time, I moved from the East Coast to San Diego, where Ian and his wife and my 3-year-old granddaughter live. And the weather is gorgeous. So that's been really nice. And Elizabeth Terry is still living on the East Coast with her wife. And both of them have worked for PXE International off and on, but now her wife's at the National Institutes of Health, and Elizabeth works for a company called Deloitte, a big consulting company. So those have been sort of the trajectory of ourselves. And then Matthew came to us now a year and 10 months ago or something, maybe 9 months ago. And Matthew, do you want to say a word?
Hi, everyone. Yes, it's, I think, pushing that 2-year mark soon, but very happy. I started working for Genetic Alliance, the umbrella organization that Sharon mentioned, but when I heard about all the wonderful things that PXE International was working on and doing, it just seemed like a great fit. Sharon brought me on board, and I'm so happy that I was able to come on and work and get to meet so many of you.
Great. And then Anna Suzanne, do you want to say a word as our oldest staff member? Not oldest.
Well, I
Longest.
might be the oldest. I am. I think I am.
We're close. We're tied almost.
I'm
Yeah.
older than you. Well, it's just a fantastic organization to be involved with. It's lovely. I just have positive things to say. And we've been coming 23 years. It's actually wonderful. And good luck for the conference. And I hope everybody enjoys it.
Great. Thank you very much. So the 4 of us are here at your service, anything you need over the weekend. Tomorrow, there'll be lots more people because what we've done is merged Europe and North America time zones in South America. And so it'll be a lot more people. We have total registered somewhere around 150 people. Even this evening, we had about 40 people registered, but we expect people can make it, can't make it. The kids are home, you know, whatever. So we're going to be flexible, and it's partly why we're recording this as well. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is talk about a little bit about how we support you. And to start to kick that off, I would love for you to type in the chat if you can, and if not, again, you can send stuff to Mary if you can't see the whole chat. Type in the chat any symptoms, signs, questions, issues you have. So stuff that you feel either you needed support and you got support for, or you still need support for. And here I just want to get us a smattering. If I opened all the mics, it would be crazy. So if you wouldn't mind putting that in the chat, that would be fabulous. And we'll all just watch the chat for a moment so we can hear each other through what we write. And I'll read these too, because I know some of you have low vision, and this there's no way to make the chat bigger, at least on my Zoom. Is there anyone who would like to type and can't? Because we're happy to help you if we can. Okay, I'm going to read some of these and certainly just wave your hand if you need help. So Marzia says, I am from Milan, Italy. It's great to be connected with you from all over the world. Thanks to Sharon and all the PXE International staff for organizing this event. Hugs to all. And I love Milan. I was supposed to be there this spring, but because of the pandemic, I didn't fly there. I will be there in 2022 for sure. Joanne, for Jason, says symptoms are primarily a loss of vision. Chris, really bad leg cramps. Again, from Joanne and Jason, interested to know what support networks and medical support there might be in the UK, as we have struggled with doctors here. Anna Suzanne mentions the skin changes. Hope describes that signs of PXE appeared at puberty on her neck. Joanne and Jason also skin markings on the neck and the elbow joints, cramping in the feet. Dara, is it important to do a calcium score for my heart? I have issues with my eyesight, but I have not had any tests on my heart yet. Rosalind, had my first injection 3 years ago. No symptoms. My checkup fell at the right time, but I'm not sure what the best practice is. I still have no symptoms and the injections worked, and I haven't had any others for 2 years. Anna Suzanne says diet. Pam says interested in finding out more about the vascular system, as I've had issues with my legs and peripheral venous system. Thanks. And Hope, bad cramps in the feet only started this year. So a whole host of signs and symptoms. Technically, the difference between a sign and a symptom is you feel a symptom, and a sign is something that gets measured in your body that you may not have any feel for. There are, as you guys all well know, and tomorrow you'll hear in much great detail, skin, the eyes, the vascular system are affected by PXE. And again, tomorrow we're going to deep dive on each one of those. I would say right here, right now, just to answer a couple of these so that we're sort of all on the same page. And then again, you're absolutely going to hear from all the experts tomorrow. With regard to the skin, there's nothing to do. There are some people who do plastic surgery, reconstructive surgery, after a number of years. We notice a difference that women get much worse skin folds and wrinkling than men. Men, for some reason, generally, and none of this is always true, generally don't get the same amount of wrinkling. And very few men have plastic surgery. Many women do wind up having plastic surgery. With regard to the eyes, good question there about what's the best practice for injections. We don't know. And you'll notice I'm going to say we don't know a lot, and I'm going to talk about how we could come to know. So we don't know. There are some clinicians, doctors who will do an injection every 4 weeks, every 6 weeks, just as a preventative. A lot of them won't. Some of that's because of the payer, the reimbursement systems in your various countries won't allow it. Until we do have what's called best practices written and published, and then the ophthalmology societies, the Royal Ophthalmology Society, the American Ophthalmology, until they all say people must get ... then the National Health Services and other things won't cover those injections except on the emergency basis. Now, that's not entirely true. Again, nothing's entirely true, but that's something else that we're working on, and I'll talk about in a second. And then with regard to the vascular system, there also is no treatment, although we're really happy that we've secured a vascular specialist to speak tomorrow, and he will describe this peripheral artery disease, which is what happens in PXE. It happens in lots and lots of diseases, diabetes, lots of other cardiovascular diseases. So the one good thing about PXE is it mimics other diseases. And so because it mimics it, we do have some good information, sometimes some good treatment, but not about PXE. So back for a moment to the eye injections. We didn't create the eye injections in the PXE community because it costs billions of dollars to create the stuff that people are injecting in your eye. But macular degeneration is the same thing, just it happens later. It's usually called age-related macular degeneration. You'll hear about that in depth tomorrow. And that has a huge market. Like all the drug companies would love to have a macular degeneration drug because the baby boomers are aging and the baby boomers are getting macular degeneration at a high rate. So it's a very common condition. So when a disease becomes very common, very popular, it gets a lot of attention. There's a race to make drugs for it. And there are already 4 drugs on the market for injections in macular degeneration, and there's another 50 in the pipeline. So that will improve. It doesn't stop PXE. That's a different story, and we're going to talk about that more on Sunday, but certainly over the weekend. And then when we get to the vascular system, again, nothing specific for PXE. The best thing is that people with PXE exercise. And sometimes this is a chicken and egg. It hurts to walk, but I have to walk. So there's this kind of back and forth here about what am I going to do? It turns out, and the vascular specialist will describe this tomorrow, he is not a PXE expert, so he will not know a lot about PXE, but he is a vascular expert, and he'll describe that the arteries actually find ways to build new arteries in your legs and arms if you exercise them. So it's a bit magical. When something gets occluded or stuck or clogged, blood says, I got to get there anyway, and makes a new pathway. And so exercising does that. We've also discovered in the last few years that exercise raises in your blood something called pyrophosphates, and you're going to hear about that tomorrow. That's what's too low in people with PXE. So we didn't know that until about a year or 2 ago, that pyrophosphate, it's the short way is to say PPI, is too low. The liver does not produce enough of it. Doesn't mean you have liver disease, but what PPI at a normal level does for people who have even a half dose of PPI is it protects the peripheral tissue, so skin, eyes, arteries, from calcifying. In the normal human body, we are constantly trying to calcify. That's like the job of the body is to repair tissue. And we repair it with calcium, magnesium, some minerals. And PPI, this pyrophosphate, regulates that. It says, hold it, don't be putting calcium down now. The tissue doesn't need it. And what's happening for people with PXE is there's not enough PPI to say, hold it. And it's not interrupting the cycle that we all have. And so instead, mineralization is happening. You'll see tomorrow, we have some good evidence that raising PPI in the blood will help to reduce the calcification in the body. One of the primary ways to increase PPI is to exercise. So some of what we're experimenting with is if you walked for 20 minutes a day, would you raise your PPI to be almost half normal? Now we might be saying, why are we going for half normal? Let's go for full normal. We're not sure we can get to full normal, but half normal is what carriers have. So if you have PXE, your mom and your dad both had half normal amounts of PPI. I have half normal amounts of PPI because I have 2 kids with PXE, even if I had 1. I only produce half of the amount of PPI a normal person does. Mary or Matthew or Anna Suzanne all produce, as far as we know, we haven't checked their ABCC6 gene. As far as we know, they produce a normal amount of PPI. There's nothing different between me and them, even though I only have a half dose of PPI. So we're, again, lucky, if we want to say it that way, that if we can get that PPI up and we can get it to half level, so let's say it's supposed to be 10, if we can get it to 5, then PXE will stop in the bodies of PXEers. So exercise is a primary way of doing that. We're also looking at some drugs that you'll hear about on Sunday, and we have some clinical trials starting that would raise PPI or change something else that would let PPI go higher. So that's something that we're very much looking at. It turns out that you can even just take PPI, ingest it orally, drink it in a solution or take a tablet, but that that we have to go through all kinds of testing to see that that's safe to do, because it's not always clear that it is. There are about 6 or 7 treatments for PXE that are being tested, which is remarkable. 5 years ago, we would say there are 0 treatments being tested for PXE. So that kind of gets us to, okay, so you guys listed in the chat a whole bunch of signs and symptoms that are important to you, to your life, et cetera. How do we get answers to those? And the only way we can get answers to those is by you guys sharing that information. We call it data when we get it into the scientific form. By you guys sharing that data so that we can advance the research. So lots of people call us or email us very frustrated that we don't have an answer about this or that. And we won't until most of the people with PXE actually share that information. So how do you do that safely and securely? Because you're all reading about every single kind of privacy breach and your information getting bought and sold. And then especially in countries where your insurance is tied to your employment, which is true for the US, and then you're supplemental in a lot of your countries as well. We have developed with a little company that Ian Terry actually works for now, a very, very secure, safe system that follows the European privacy directives. So it's safe to use in UK, Europe. We're using it with lots and lots of diseases. And we've sent you the link a number of times, a number of different ways, and we'll be talking about that off and on this weekend. So the PXE registry that we've sent you the link for, we would love for you to make sure you log in regularly and answer the questionnaires regularly, because that'll be the way that we get the information we need in order to figure out how to support you. I'm going to stop talking there and see questions, comments, anybody having trouble with that link or hasn't received the link yet, because we can definitely get that out to you even right now. Matthew's quite facile at emailing. Any questions or comments on any of that? Give you a few seconds because sometimes it's hard to unmute. Thanks, Joanne and Jason. We'll send you that link, and actually Matthew will also put it right here in the chat for you to click on. Thanks, Pam. So while we're thinking about that, the other reason why, so we first of all want to paint a really good picture of PXE. And you can imagine if I just took information from you guys on the screen here, that you don't represent the 5,000 people with PXE. And so we'll leave out a big part of the story if everyone doesn't participate. And we want to make sure we have the story right. The next thing is, we have no way to tell when something's working or not working in PXE. And by that, I mean, if your doctor gave you high blood pressure medicine, then what does he do or she do to tell whether or not it's working? They put a blood pressure cuff on you and they have a number that comes up, right? And then they say, didn't work, more medicine, less medicine, another medicine. And that's their measure. That's called a biomarker in fancy terms, a measure of whether or not it's working. Same thing with if it's cholesterol, they give you medicine. And if your cholesterol is different 4 weeks from now, they know it worked. We don't have anything like that in PXE, because you can imagine that you would go in 4 weeks later after having taken an experimental drug and have the doctor look at your neck skin, and he or she's probably not going to be able to tell from your neck skin whether or not the drug is working to stop PXE progressing. We did an experiment with magnesium a couple of years ago, and what we did is biopsy people's necks. But once we biopsied your neck, that skin is gone. We can't biopsy that same skin next time to see if there's less calcium in that skin. And it's not uniform all around the neck, for example, or underarms or groin. So that's not a good measure. We could go to the eyes and say, okay, if we give you the drug today and you come back in 6 months, do you have more angioid streaks? Do you have more retinal bleeds? Well, maybe you do and maybe you don't, because you may have noticed that sometimes you do and sometimes you don't. That your PXE is progressing at a different rate all the time yourself personally, and then differently than everybody else. So that's not a good measure. And then we get to something like the pain in your legs when you walk. Well, is it kind of hurting? Is it hurting on a scale of 1 to 10? All that's so subjective, it doesn't really make a difference. So what we're trying to do in the next year is to figure out, what do we want to measure? We probably want to measure PPI in the blood. We probably want to measure with a Doppler or some other kind of gadget the blood flow in your legs. We don't think skin and eyes are going to make good biomarkers. And while we can't reverse anything right now, we want to slow PXE down. PXE is already a slow disease. You guys all know some people who have little kids who have a horrible rare disease and they die of it by the time they're 4 or 5 or 6. So things like Hutchinson-Gilford progeria or Tay-Sachs, or one of these diseases that are just devastating. PXE is much slower, and none of us, I don't think, would have elected not to be born because we have this condition. So what we need to find out is, what can we get as a measure that we can measure in a short time, like 2 years, rather than 20 years, which is more the timeline to get something done. So that's kind of our really strong, you hear me constantly saying in the newsletter, please, please fill out your information in the registry. And that's why I'm begging. This year, I happen to turn 65 this year, and which now I've outed Anna Suzanne's age as well. And as a birthday present on Facebook, I put, please register for the registry. I don't want any birthday presents. And if you want to donate some money, great. But more important is register for the registry. So if you guys could please do that and answer the questionnaires in there, it makes a difference for everybody. The other very big piece of this is when we go to the FDA, which you've all heard of now because it was the entity that was approving the vaccines for COVID. The European Medicines Agency in Europe is the name of the entity. I forgot the name in South Africa, but we all have a body that protects everybody around what drugs you can take or not take. When we go to them, they say, too bad you have 6 treatments for PXE. You have no measure. Until you come back to us with a measure, then we are not going to approve these drugs. And so they're stuck. They're in that limbo like Moderna's vaccine was for a long time of, nope, not approving it, not enough data. And so what we want to do is be able to go back to those agencies and say, we have enough data now. Because when they come to us and say, oh, you have 5,000 people with PXE, and as of this week, 1,000 have registered, but only 600 have filled out questionnaires, not so good. So they want to see us come to them and say, 5,000 people with PXE, 4,000 registered and filled out questionnaires. Then they're going to be talking to us, and we really want them to be doing that. Okay, and Dara, you bring up a great point. It'd be amazing to measure PPI and compare it with an exercise plan. So that's something we're hoping in 2022 to be able to do, and we can do that through this registry system online. So what we'll be doing is inviting a bunch of you through the system to do an exercise plan, trying to do a partnership with Fitbit or somebody else like that so that we can get that data coming in and see if we take your blood at the beginning, take your blood at the end, do we see PPI rising in a day, in a week, in a month, that sort of thing. So that's another thing we're definitely planning on doing. Okay. Anything else? Any questions, comments before we go into breakout rooms and just have informal chat as though you're having a glass of wine or a cup of tea or coffee with each other? Okay. Well, we're going to have all weekend together. I hope that most of you can participate. Joanne, I'll answer your question. So PXE first emerged 100 years before 1998. I think it was something like 1898, 1880, somewhere in there. Two doctors, Gronblad and Stromberg, discovered it. And those clinicians reported it badly, so that we got this weird name from them. So they reported that the people with PXE had yellow bumps, which is not entirely true, on their necks called xanthomas, which were things that doctors would see on some people's eyelids who had high cholesterol. So a xanthoma is this fatty deposit on the eyelid. And that wasn't true about the neck. So then they had already said it was xanthoma, so they named it pseudoxanthoma, which means kind of or fake or not really. And then they discovered, oh, it's really about elastic tissue. It's not about cholesterol. And so they stuck elasticum on the end. So we wind up with this name, pseudoxanthoma elasticum, from the late 1800s, and it's been the name ever since. We're lucky that we can say PXE. At one point, we had T-shirts that said PXE means never having to say pseudoxanthoma elasticum. My kids, when they were very newly diagnosed, found a spider on the front steps and said, "Mom, we found a pseudoxanthoma elasticum on the front steps." Because it was Latin, they figured it must be the name of a species or something. So yeah, I'll talk about diet in 1 second, but I'll go to Chris. You have a question?
Yeah, hi Sharon, and thanks to everybody for putting this together. My voice is a bit weird, and that's another thing I need to find out about PXE. But when you mentioned that PXE is a very good mimic of other conditions that may be well served by certain treatments, is there any other condition where there's a system that has a problem with like 50% PPI, or is there another system that has a problem with restricted blood flow in the legs, both of which you said, you know, hopefully you'll be looking at maybe getting some monitoring in the future, but does that exist with anything else at the moment? Great
question. So with regard to the PPI, it does appear to be low in this disease called GACI, G-A-C-I, which has a long name that I don't remember. GACI is caused by a different gene. ENPP1 is the gene, and children with GACI babies die around age 1. So their mineralization is severe. When you take a radiograph of their bodies, it's got clogged arteries, like thick with calcium, and so they die. They can't live. So there's also some studies that are going to be looking at both of these. They're going to be looking at PXE and GACI, even though they're not the same disease at all, to see are there some things we could learn from each. There's not really any other disease that is so exclusively low PPI, at least that we know so far, as PXE. One of the things we need to find out are the people, to your second part of your question, people with this peripheral artery disease or intermittent claudication, we call it in PXE, do they have low PPI? And nobody's ever measured it. It's an odd thing to measure. You know, when you go to the doctor and get your panel of things like liver enzymes and cholesterol, nobody's ever measuring PPI. Turns out it's hard to measure, and it's getting now standardized about how to measure it. So we don't know if there's some other diseases where the intermittent claudication is related to PPI, and that'll be an interesting thing to find out. And then there is a whole consortium of diseases under this umbrella called vascular cures, and we're working with them to say we all should be able to use similar solutions. And exercise is one, but there's a couple of drugs that the vascular specialist tomorrow will talk about, because they have perfected some drugs for use in PXE, for use in people with intermittent claudication. Okay. As far as diet, that came up, thanks Anna Suzanne for reminding me. heart healthy diet is also critical. So I said exercise, turns out heart healthy diet is also really important. We haven't really yet done a good comparison of people who keep themselves healthy, essentially, in the sense of being able to notice how's my diet, how's my exercise, and so forth. But we think that PXE is drastically lower in people who have a good diet. We know, for example, that people lose their vision or at least have these bleeds years in advance of others if they smoke. So smoking is horrible for PXE. It is for any vascular disease. We know that it's bad for macular degeneration. There's really not much good reason aside from the things that people experience in terms of calming and the social peace and so forth. So finding something else instead of smoking is a good idea. Heart healthy diet, well, that means different things to different people. A Mediterranean diet is fabulous. And so again, we're finding less of certain aspects of these diseases for people who have a Mediterranean diet. If you're interested in heart healthy diet, we certainly can get you some info, but you can Google that and you'll find the American Heart Association, some of the European heart groups, UK heart groups that are actually putting out good information about what that means. Essentially, it means low fat, lots of fruits and vegetables, not so much cooked stuff, more eating the stuff that's not so so processed would be what I'd say about that. And then Joanne, you remember seeing something regarding vitamin C being helpful. I don't know if that was from us. It may have been from another group. One of the things I am not fond of is the internet has tons of information and a lot of it's false information. We haven't tested vitamin C and PXE. With regard to vitamins, I think keeping them up through eating is the best way because then they're bioavailable, they're available to your body. But where you know you have a deficiency, for example, I can't get citrus all winter in some places, then, taking vitamin C, taking other vitamins is probably a good idea. And then a list of areas we should be asking doctors to monitor. And someone else had put, what about my heart? So the biggest thing, so enzymes in the liver, no, because they don't measure PPI and it doesn't matter. So the issue here is PXE is not a liver disease and it's not going to show up on a liver panel. It's a peripheral calcification disease. And so we're going to see it showing up in the peripheral tissues. And so that's where we want to monitor. So we recommend everybody look at the Amsler grid every day. That's that grid with all the lines on it. Or some people use their bathroom tile or their kitchen floor, whatever you can see, or they have a profession where they're looking at graph paper all day, looking at that to see if there's any distortion so that you can go get a shot right away. The other things you do is have an annual checkup. Nothing special, like we used to say, go to the cardiologist and get a checkup from the cardiologist. That's not important. We don't see any progression in the heart. We again see it in the peripheral vascular areas. So if you start to have pain when you start walking, then walk more, and you might want to see a vascular specialist just to monitor that. But it's slow going, and in other words, it doesn't progress very fast, and you should be able to catch it and make a difference by exercise if you can. Anything else? Okay. All right. So this is just about right timing. So we have about an hour left. And what I would want to do is to, and which specialist to see annually? Your general practitioner, whatever you call that person, the general doctor for you, and an ophthalmologist. Those would be the two that you would see every year. And then the ophthalmologist you'd see extra if you saw a bleed. Okay. All right, so I'm going to open what are called breakout rooms. Some of you are familiar with Zoom and know that you'll be whisked away into a room with a subset of the people here on the screen. If you've never been in Zoom before, then you will find yourself in a room with a couple of people. The reason we want to do that is because this group's too big to have a conversation that's just social. You're kind of going to pretend that this is the the tables around the conference room or the line for the food. Unfortunately, you're going to have to eat your own food and use your own restroom, which is good because there are no lines. But on the other hand, we're trying to find a way to make this a little social. And so in the breakout rooms, feel free to just talk about whatever you want to talk about. The same thing as you would do at a meeting, maybe social things like, where do you live and how many kids do you have, or do you have a dog, that kind of stuff. Or you may want to share some things about your condition. So all that is just for you to have this time together. And we'll do that for about, let's say, 30 minutes. If you have to leave, feel free. If you want to stay longer, what's going to happen is I'm going to bring everybody back at 30 minutes. And then we'll just be able to see who wants to stick around and have a chat. We are leaving the Zoom open from now all the way to Sunday evening for you guys in Europe. It'll be Sunday afternoon for folks. Actually, it'll be Sunday evening for the Eastern time zone of the US. So essentially, this is open till Monday morning for you. So if at any time you want to pop in when no sessions are going on, Mary sent you the list of everybody who's registered, and you can grab a bunch of people, email them and say, want to meet me? And then you guys can come in and go to breakout rooms and be chatting with each other. Any questions about all that before we go off?
A few people joined, Sharon, maybe
Yeah.
just, yeah.
Yeah, so just to orient folks who joined, we just did a little orientation for the meeting. We'll do that again this evening, middle of the night for you guys, but this is recorded. And then tomorrow we'll kick off with talks all day, all afternoon for you guys on PXE's various organ systems that are affected. There'll be some more networking time. And then Sunday, you're going to hear the cutting edge research of what's been happening in PXE research. And there'll be plenty of time tomorrow after each of the talks to ask questions. If you can't attend, what we are doing is recording all of this. You can watch these recordings at your leisure. And then we will have over the next few weeks a couple question and answer periods that work for all of the time zones. So in other words, probably 3 or 4 of them, different times, so that various time zones can join. And that will make that easier for everybody to kind of get a piece of the pie. Okay. All right, I'm going to open the rooms. It's top of the hour here. I will then close them around 30 minutes from now. And then we'll come back together to say goodbye. Although, again, you're welcome to stay. This will just be kind of the end of this evening's meeting. All right. All right, here we go.